Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be going over three storms in the Atlantic. We have Tropical Storm Grace, which is currently near Jamaica. It recently went through the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and now it's going to be moving into the Gulf of Mexico, where it does have the shot of strengthening quite nicely. We have Tropical Storm Henri, which is right around Bermuda, and it's kind of circling around there. It does have the potential of becoming a high-end tropical storm, and who knows, maybe even a weak Category 1 hurricane. And then we have Tropical Depression Fred, which is currently over parts of Alabama and Georgia, and that's inland right now. It is weakening as we speak, but the main threat from that storm is actually going to be the flooding. We already had some reports upwards of 8 inches of rain in some parts of the Carolinas, so we're going to be talking about that and more in today's video, so make sure you are staying tuned all the way until the end. Here's a look at the current National Weather Service page. As you can see, we have some air quality alerts which scattered throughout parts of the northwest and generally the west. Overall, we have a lot of air quality alerts in that area, and it's somewhat due to the smoke from all these wildfires in the northern and central Rockies. We have red flag warnings in effect for parts of the Dakotas, Nebraska, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, California, and Oregon. And then we even have a few flood watches just to the south of there in southern Utah, and then also for a little bit of northern Washington and the panhandle of Idaho. We also have more flood watches in effect for the southern Appalachians, and that covers parts of northern Georgia, northern South Carolina, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, southwestern Virginia, and a little bit of Kentucky and West Virginia as well. We have a tornado watch currently in effect for northeastern Georgia, and I would not be surprised if that were to be extended up further to the north over the next couple of hours, because we do have a slight risk of severe weather within this area right here. So I would not be surprised if they extend that tornado watch. Looking at yesterday, we had a high temperature tied between two areas where we both got to 120 degrees. Death Valley, California, and Stovepipe Wells, California, both got up to 120 degrees. Low temperature of 29 in Peter Sinks, Utah. Highest rainfall report, Wolf Mountain, North Carolina, in southwestern North Carolina. They got 8.62 inches of rainfall, and that was not just some outlier. That was not an outlier report. We had many that were over 5 inches, and we had a flash flood warning right over that area near Wolf Mountain, North Carolina. So I was able to verify that that most likely was an accurate report of heavy rainfall, and that's unfortunate because it looks like they're actually going to get even more rainfall, maybe an additional 2 to 4 inches over the next few hours. So really no end in sight for some of that rainfall. And also, now moving on to the National Hurricane Center, you can see that we do have those three storms. We have Tropical Depression Fred over to the southeast. We have Tropical Storm Henri, which is just south of Bermuda. By the way, Bermuda is right there. So it's just to the northwest of Tropical Storm Henri. And then we have Tropical Storm Grace, which is right near Jamaica and to the south of Cuba as of right now. And it's expected to move pretty much straight west-northwestward into eastern Mexico. So, taking a look at a few of these individual storms, we're going to start off with Tropical Depression Fred because it is having the biggest impacts on the United States as of right now. You can see that it does look very well developed, and if this were, let's say, in the winter time, this would be probably a big snowstorm because it does have a lot of moisture with it. It is fairly well developed. It doesn't have those tropical elements to it. So, it loses its tropical elements, but it is still a big rainmaker over many of these areas. We have a very well-defined rotation. We have a load of dry air wrapping in on the southern end, but then we have all that moisture being funneled up on the eastern end from the Atlantic. So we have somewhat of a spin of dry and more moisture-ridden air in parts of the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and that's generally where that storm is as of now. The center of the storm is right in northern Georgia by this point, and you can see most of the convection is just to the north of the center, but it is raining over many of these areas, even extending far to the north of the storm. So not just in the areas that are very close to the storm, even areas much further to the north are dealing with rain as of right now. Taking a look at the surface plot, it's located at 32.3 degrees north by 85 degrees west, maximum winds of 35 miles per hour with a minimum pressure of 1,004 millibars, moving north-northeast at 14 miles per hour. This was the last surface plot of this, so this is not the updated one. If you were to look at the updated one, it would probably be somewhere right within here. So I couldn't find the updated image just because it hadn't come out by this point. But just for that sake, it would be a little bit further to the north than what's represented on this image. Taking a look at the key messages, you can see that we only have one up right now. They're talking about through Tuesday, heavy rainfall may lead to considerable flash, urban, small stream, and isolated river flooding impacts across portions of the Florida Panhandle, southeastern Alabama, and from western Georgia into the southern Appalachians. By the middle of the week, Fred or its remnants will lift northward and impact the central Appalachians and mid-Atlantic. Landslides are possible across the mountains of North Carolina and Blue Ridge escarpment on Tuesday. So they're talking about especially in parts of western North Carolina, maybe even into eastern Tennessee, northeastern Georgia, westernmost South Carolina, and then even up into, let's say, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. There are some risks of flash flooding. We're going to talk about that in just about a minute from now. Taking a look at the cone forecast, it is expected to stay as a tropical depression all throughout the next, I would say, 3 days, probably over the next 2 days, more around there. By the time it heads up into Pennsylvania, I would expect it to be a ex-tropical storm, so it would probably lose its tropical depression status. But you can see it doesn't really matter whether this is a tropical depression or not. The winds are not the issue. It's more about the flooding, which is more the concern. Taking a look at the track forecast from the models, you can see that it is expected to move northeastward into parts of the central and southern Appalachians, and then we have a little bit of a dilemma as it heads into West Virginia. As it moves into that area, we see two different possibilities. We see one that kind of moves up the west side of the Appalachians through parts of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and upstate New York, and then we see another one which goes through Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, and then hops out into the Atlantic. So we have two different ideas of what could happen. This will have an impact on the amount of rainfall, but again, we're not expecting any tropical impacts, so the track of the storm really isn't too important. It's not as important as tropical storms Grace or Henri as of now, just because mainly the only threats are going to be rainfall out of this event. Taking a look at the forecasted rainfall totals, we are still, and this is, by the way, this was created at 8:07 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm recording this at right around, right now, it's about 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So only about an hour ago this was the forecast, and that's added on to, again, the 8+ inches of rainfall that we saw in western North Carolina. Generally, it was 4+ inches of rainfall. So you're adding on another 4 to 6 or even over an isolated area, 6 to 10 inches of rainfall within western North Carolina, northeastern Georgia. That's not a good combination. And you even look up all through the spine of the Appalachians, from the southern Appalachians in Georgia all the way up into parts of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. We have pockets of 2 to 4 inches over a wide span, and then even a few little areas of 4 to 6 inches of rainfall. So even though it doesn't look like it, this will have big impacts even as you get up into the northeast and as you get into the Ohio Valley, especially as you get closer to the Appalachians. That's where we could be dealing with a considerable amount of rainfall that could definitely lead to flash flooding. And if we look at the risk of flash flooding, we have a 20% chance, moderate risk, in this red area, and then we have a 50 to 100% chance of flash flooding in that high risk, which is right over that 8-inch report in western North Carolina, and that's over an area of higher elevation. So most of that rainfall is not staying at the mountaintops. It's actually flowing down into the valleys, so that could cause flash flooding if you live down in those valleys, and it could also cause some issues, maybe with some isolated mudslides. Even though the elevation differences aren't that dramatic like they are out in the west, that is still a possibility with the amount of rainfall that you are seeing, 10+ inches, which is forecasted in total over the past couple of days and over the next couple of days. Taking a look at the intensity of the storm, you can see that right now it is that high-end tropical depression. It's expected to weaken into a mid-level tropical depression. But again, the wind speeds, again, are not really the main factor. It's mostly the rainfall with this event. Taking a look at our next storm, and I think Tropical Storm Grace, this is going to be a big storm that we really want to pay attention to. It's small, compact, and going over very favorable waters. You can see that it is fairly well developed. It doesn't look too tropical as of this point. We just have a big blob of cloud cover, but that's at least good for development because a lot of these storms that go through this area that have to pass through the high mountainous areas of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, that can usually tear these storms apart. The fact that this storm is small and compact like this and is also moving over very favorable waters, which are over the lower Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico, that really have been untapped so far. That is going to help the storm really develop. We also don't see any weaknesses with this. We don't see any gaping holes where dry air is being infiltrated. It's mostly just a big area of moisture that's moving across Jamaica and Cuba as of now, and it's also departing Haiti as of right now. So this really doesn't have too many weaknesses, and I think if it does go correctly, we could see a fairly big storm, maybe even approaching hurricane status, but almost certainly this will be at least a high-end tropical storm. Taking a look at the surface plot, you can see that it's located at 18.2 degrees north by 76.1 degrees west. Maximum winds of 45 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,005 millibars, moving west at 16 miles per hour. So it's moving fast, so that will help it to maybe even gain a little bit of strength. Sometimes these fast-moving storms can actually add a few miles per hour onto the wind speed just because of how fast they're moving. Preferably, we would see this move faster because that would mean less time over open water, more time for this to weaken over land, but we're going to have to see whether this slows down. If it does slow down over the Caribbean, that's going to be bad news for a lot of people because that would mean it's going to probably strengthen into something a little bit more dramatic than what it currently is in. Taking a look at the key messages, you can see that the first one says heavy rainfall across the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica, and the Cayman Islands, and the northern Yucatan Peninsula may lead to flash urban and small stream flooding with the potential for mudslides highest in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, again, due to the higher elevations. The second key message says tropical storm conditions are possible over portions of Hispaniola and over Jamaica on today. Tropical storm conditions are expected over portions of the southern coast of Cuba today, spreading westward to the Cayman Islands and possibly over portions of the possibly over other portions of the southern coast of Cuba this evening through Wednesday morning. There's an increasing risk of wind, rainfall, and storm surge impacts on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico yet Wednesday night and Thursday. Interests in these areas should monitor the progress of Grace and updates to the forecast. So that's what the National Hurricane Center is saying from this. Taking a look at the current watches and warnings, you can see that this storm did put up quite a few warnings. We have tropical storm watches in over Haiti right now. Over western Cuba, we also have some tropical storm watches. And then we even have a few hurricane watches, even though the National Hurricane Center, as of now, does not have the strengthening to a hurricane. The fact that they put that hurricane watch up means that I think they probably want to put this up to hurricane strength. They think it probably will be, but they just don't want to put it in the forecast as of now, just so that they don't cause any alarmism over these areas. So I do think this will probably become either a high-end tropical storm or a Category 1, a weak Category 1. That is definitely in play. Tropical storm warnings over Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, also into eastern Cuba. So you can see we have a wide span of these warnings all throughout the Caribbean. Taking a look at the path of the storm, you can see stays as a tropical depression or tropical storm the entire way, all the way from Jamaica to eastern Mexico. But they have those hurricane watches up for the Yucatan Peninsula. I would not be surprised if we see possibly by Wednesday afternoon this strengthen up into a hurricane, and maybe even on the other side of the Yucatan Peninsula, this might also become a hurricane as well. So Again, we're going to have to continue to track that. This is probably the most intriguing one for me, at least, because this does have the chance of potentially becoming a hurricane, and I think it has the most potential out of all three storms that we're currently tracking. Taking a look at the track of the storm from the models, most of them have this going pretty much straight west-northwestward, but we have a few outliers. We potentially have the risk of this moving northward into the Gulf of Mexico. These two would be worst-case scenarios, and the reason why would be because we're going over pretty much straight over open waters instead of having that break over the Yucatan Peninsula where this could potentially be broken up a little bit. This would have the potential of becoming a major hurricane if this were to be the case. I don't think this is the case, but we do have to watch out for it. And this is similar to what happens in those big major hurricanes that impact Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. They kind of just go right in between Cuba and Mexico. If they stay over that open water, they really are not weakening until they hit the United States, which of course can cause a lot of damage as it's already a strong storm by that point. It's not likely that happens at all. I think that's very unlikely at this point, but we do have most of the models, again, taking this over the Yucatan Peninsula and then moving this back over the Gulf of Mexico. Looking at the intensity guidance, most of these storms have this, most of the models have this storm becoming a high-end tropical storm, and then kind of just tapering out over the Yucatan Peninsula. You can see that drop. This is where we enter the Yucatan Peninsula, and then this is where we go out of the Yucatan Peninsula. So there's going to be a little bit of a 24-hour dip, and then it goes back over to the Gulf of Mexico, intensifies, and then moves back over eastern Mexico, and that's where it becomes a weak tropical storm by that point. The first peak over the next couple of days, over the next 2 days, if this peak can kind of curve up a little bit more, we could potentially see this become a category 1. It's going to have to go over rapid intensification. It doesn't have a lot of time, but I would say it is possible for this to briefly become a hurricane. Taking a look at the aircraft recon from the storm, you can see that the strongest winds are being found on the northern side of the storm, especially over the northeastern quadrant, where we actually have some wind gusts up near 50 to 55 knots, even closer to 55 or 60 knots. Only a few higher wind gusts, and you would already be up near Category 1 status. So we'll have to see what happens as they pass through the storm. They've already done 3 in just the past 12 hours, so I would not be surprised if we're going to see another one and maybe even one more just over the next 6 to 12 hours. So they're constantly moving in with the NOAA aircraft into the storm to try and figure out what's happening, to try and update the forecast. So I would not be surprised if they go in again and maybe they find those higher end wind gusts throughout this storm. Now moving on to the storm up near Bermuda. By the way, Bermuda is right here, and here's Tropical Storm Henri, just to the south of there. Tropical Storm Henri is going to be moving just around Bermuda. It's going to be kind of curving around there, and then eventually moving into the northern Atlantic. So again, the impacts on Bermuda itself probably won't be that high, but it will be interesting at least to track this. We have at least one more storm in the Atlantic. Taking a look at the surface plot, you can see it's located at 30.5 degrees north by 64 degrees west, maximum winds of 50 miles per hour, minimum pressure of 1,004 millibars, moving west-southwest at 5 miles per hour. You can see the past track of the storm, so you can see that it started off on the east side of Bermuda, and then it now is on the southern side, and it probably will make a full loop. It's expected to have a track somewhat like this. You can see the current extent of those tropical storm winds, barely even making it somewhat close to Bermuda. So the actual island of Bermuda itself not really having too many impacts in terms of the tropical storm force winds. They are dealing with some rainfall, and they do have a tropical storm watch up, although again, the likelihood of any sustained damage or sustained damaging winds over Bermuda are not there as of right now. Taking a look at the track, it's expected to stay as a tropical storm. No expectation of this becoming a hurricane. It is possible. I'll give it maybe a 10 or 20% chance of that occurring, but I think it's more likely that this just stays as a mid or even high-end tropical storm, as it kind of just curves right around Bermuda, and then eventually this would be moving out into the northern Atlantic. taking a look at the model guidance, you can see that we have a few models that want to take this up the west side of Bermuda. I'll have Bermuda highlighted in pink just so it kind of stands out. So there's Bermuda and that pink dot right there. You can see it is expected to move just to the west of there on 3 of these different models. The rest of the models have this moving to the south and then curving up northeast of Bermuda. So I would say there's probably a 5-10% chance that this makes it even remotely close to Bermuda, that it takes the track of these 3 lines right here that take it up the west side of Bermuda. I think this is probably going to go with the majority of the models. It's probably going to stay to the south and then eventually curve up northeastward, not having too many impacts on the island itself. And if you look at the model intensity guidance, there is a decent shot that as it curves back up on the north side of Bermuda, away from the island itself, not having any impacts on the island, that this may curve up near Category 1, or who knows, even maybe Category 2 status. It would be well out to see by that point. No impacts on land, but it would just be interesting to see if that happens. It's going to be very stable. It's going to pretty much stay the same as either a mid-level or a high-end tropical storm over the next few days. We're not expecting any major fluctuations within the storm's intensity. This is going to wrap it up for today's video. So if you did enjoy it, please consider leaving a like and turning on notifications. Also, please subscribe. If you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'll be responding to pretty much all of them. And that is going to wrap it up. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.